Okay. All right. Well, actually some good news. Actually some good news in the world of politics because last night there were some important primaries as this is a midterm year and there are primaries that are happening now at the end of the month in the summer. And last night, one of the biggest primaries happened in Texas. You had Jasmine Crockett, who I wonder how the Las Culturistas girlies feel. I wonder how Bowen Yang and Matt Rogers are feeling. I wonder if they feel vindicated or they're like, just keep me the fuck away from this. Keep me away. We had Jasmine Crockett, who had to concede to James Tallarico, who ran up monster numbers per Steve Kornacki's analysis and defeated Jasmine Crockett. And then on top of that, she was replaced by Reverend Haynes. Yes, Reverend Haynes, who actually, I think Jasmine Crockett is a congregant at his church. Like she endorsed him because he's her pastor, but this guy rules. This guy is fucking awesome. And I think one takeaway from last night is that being pro-Israel, especially as a Democrat, is not winning you votes. And in fact, I think we can say that unwavering support for Israel is it's a mark against you. And that is good. And then on top of that, we saw that Gavin Newsom clip today where he has flip-flopped yet again. He went from agreeing with Ben Shapiro that what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. This was literally a couple weeks ago. To now he's saying Israel is an apartheid state. And you should not, the takeaway from that should not be, ooh, Gavin Newsom, super based. He's our guy. Hoorah. The takeaway from that is that Gavin Newsom is looking at what's going on. He is politically shrewd. He is a political chameleon. And he is going with what he sees the Democratic support in, and there is not support for Israel. The majority of people in this country are more sympathetic with Palestinians than Israelis, than with Israel, but especially with Democratic voters. Democratic voters do not want to have candidates, either incumbents or people who are running for the seat, who are sending their tax dollars to Israel. And so I think last night, and also what we're seeing around, Graham Plattner's race, and I don't want to get into I don't need to get into everything, but I think on the topic of Israel, when you have establishment corporate Dems who are funded by AIPAC, who are all about continuing support to Israel, in bombing Iran, bombing Lebanon, etc. And then you have a candidate who's the opposite of that. The winds keep shifting. The winds have shifted and they keep on shifting, and they are shifting away from supporting Israel. I think it proves that Newsom has no core beliefs. Oh yeah. Newsom does not stand for anything other than his own political ambitions, other than what is going to put him in the White House. And so that, to me, is why he's now calling Israel an apartheid state. And it's actually a good thing, not because that means that Gavin Newsom is suddenly morally has a moral conscience here, but because of how that indicates where support is as far as Israel's continued just receiving of funds and financial, political support from the Democratic Party. I expect Newsom will have another 4 to 5 different identities before the primaries even start. Yeah. Here, before I play Steve Kornacki talking about the race last night, here is the clip of Gavin Newsom with John Favreau and Tommy Vitor.
Have looked at the Netanyahu regime and felt
sorry, Nikki, thank you for the 30 months. Timmy, thank you for the 16 months that are not. Thank you for the 39. Malo, thank you for the prime. Seattle Green, thank you for the gifted. Blue Light, thank you for the 2 months. Nguyen, thank you for the 2 months. Crumpets, thank you for the gifted. Mai Tai, thank you for the 14 months. Thank you.
But we don't like the trajectory he's on. It's time to rethink the U.S. relationship with Israel, especially military support.
Well,
where do you
Bibi's
stand?
making that easy right now. Let's talk about that. But the issue of Bibi is interesting because he's got his own domestic issues. He's trying to stay out of jail. He's got an election coming up.
Why is this clip so weirdly filtered?
He's potentially on the ropes. He's got folks, the hard line, that want to annex the West Bank. I mean, Freeman and others are talking about it appropriately, sort of an apartheid state. They couldn't even, we're talking about regime change. For 2 years, they haven't even been able to solve the Hamas question in Israel. So this is, I want to be careful here.
He looks like a
in so many
Borderlands
ways,
villain.
that influence in the context of the conversation of where Trump ultimately landed on this is pretty damn self-evident. And so Rubio may have been saying something else in the context of what he ultimately said in terms of being sort of pulled into some of these things. But I will say this, didn't surprise me in this context. I don't know if it was Napoleon or whoever said about a sword, the only thing you can't use a sword for is sitting on it.
He loves to pull up his historical quotes.
And when you bring 2 aircraft carriers out there and you assemble the kind of military force that Trump did over the last few weeks, it didn't surprise me ultimately they moved that direction.
Do you think, looking down the road, that the United States should consider maybe, rethinking our military support for Israel?
It breaks my heart because the current leadership in Israel is walking us down that path where I don't think you have a choice but that consideration. To say this is in America's interest at a time when affordability is at crisis levels, where you had an administration who literally got elected saying this is exactly the opposite of what they would ever consider doing. The fact that we are in this now regional war, all these proxies.
Also, to be clear, this is still the framing that unfortunately people like Bernie Sanders also consistently engage in, which is to classify the blame here as being that of Netanyahu and his government, as this being a current issue, rather than how the government has operated for almost 80 years. This is like the liberal Zionist position. It's still Zionist. It's still Zionist because it's intentional in placing the blame on Netanyahu, the individual, and on Netanyahu's government. So you remove Netanyahu, and they do that too because Netanyahu is a right wing. He's right wing, right? Like this isn't even a guy who is center or on the left, but obviously is super Zionist all the same. He's very right wing. And so that also is why Gavin Newsom, Bernie Sanders, others who will not have the ultimate correct position here on Israel, why they lay the blame on Netanyahu and Donald Trump.
The fact that we, and all the grift and the corruption, that's also marks a huge part of this. And that's a real conversation we need to have, this board of peace. And the peace that the Witkoff family's getting, and the peace that Kushner is getting, and the peace that Trump Jr. is getting.
Yeah, but anywho, I do think that this is classic Gavin Newsom. This is classic Democratic Party establishment guy who is eyeing a presidential run and who is politically shrewd and wants to take the position where he thinks he's going to get the least amount of flack for it. Because he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to piss. Yeah, he's positioning himself so that he seems to be the correct moral arbiter here. He will parrot the word apartheid this week and then say trans kids are confused the next. Yeah, and I think the reason that he keeps throwing trans people under the bus, keeps saying like we got to stop with the pronoun stuff, is one, he is surrounded by the types of consultants who write pieces for the New York Times saying that for the Democrats to win, they have to drop the pro-immigrant, pro-trans, pro-Palestine, which is not even the case, shtick, that it's like, this is what's hurting Democrats in elections. And there are plenty of Democratic voters who maybe don't feel that way on Palestine, funny enough, but definitely feel that way about the, identitarianism, we keep losing because we keep talking about trans rights. We keep talking about the trans community, and that's why we're losing our elections. Or like, we have to be tougher on the border because that's how the American people feel. So trans people are a very easy target, obviously. Transphobia is very acceptable in liberal spaces, as it is in conservative spaces. So I think Gavin is one of these politicians who thinks that he's appealing to a lot of voters by saying enough with focusing on pronouns and trans people. Okay, we got to get to what matters here, which is affordability, which is not the right way to do things, not just from the moral position, from the, hey, everybody should have fucking rights here, but also from the political strategist position. If you look at Zohran Mamdani, if you look at people who have been successful in positioning their campaign around an agenda of affordability, they did not do so at the expense of queer and trans people. When asked about trans rights, on like how he feels on the trans issue, Zohran Mamdani was always clear in his support for trans rights because trans people are members of the working class. Trans people are trying to have health care. They're trying to be able to afford their bills, just like everybody else. So he would always do such a good way of like bringing the conversation back to economic populism, to, affordability, but never doing so in the way that Gavin does, which is to be like, enough with the pronouns, am I right? And he won. Zohran Mamdani went in the span of a year from polling at under 1% to winning the New York mayoral election. And there were a lot of people who voted for him who are not the kind of people that are like on the front lines of fighting for trans rights, but they don't have an issue with someone. They don't have an issue voting for someone who is pro-trans rights when they feel that that is a person whose agenda is about cost of living, that is what they are there to enact policies on, to make everybody's life more affordable, to make, the city that people reside in, trans or cis, whoever you are. And that was incredibly effective messaging and policy.
Welcome back to Meet the Press Now. If it's Wednesday, we have election results. And the first primaries of
Frost
this midterm
Texas,
election year certainly
Nikki,
had their share of surprises and some confusion as well. The big story coming overnight with NBC News projecting State Representative James Tallarico has defeated Congresswoman
Colin Allred was hardcore anti-trans in Texas, lost by 8.5 points in 2024. Tallarico is pro-trans and even said God is an NB, is the favorite to win the Senate election in November in Texas. I mean, it's going to be a hell of a fight. I would not look at this as, James Tallarico has this in the bag, because a Democrat has not won a statewide race since 1994. So absolutely. I mean, the Republican primary was already the most expensive Senate primary in history. They're going to be pouring so much money into this. That primary hasn't even concluded. They are in a runoff right now. It's also Texas. But what I think James Tallarico at least shows is that, one, voters looked at a guy like him and looked at a candidate like him and thought this is the person who is best positioned to beat the Republican. They rejected Jasmine Crockett's support for Israel, and also just the fact that like Jasmine Crockett didn't have policies. It was vibes. She was like, hey, vote for me because I'm Jasmine Crockett. And people were like, well, what's your agenda? So James Tallarico can be pro-trans, should be pro-trans, because he is focusing his campaign on positioning billionaires as the antagonistic force here of like other successful progressives who have been winning, talking about affordability. So he is pointing to who the real villain is. The real villain being the billionaires who are in charge of this country, even though nobody put them there, nobody wants them there.
Jasmine Crockett to win the Democratic nomination in the race for U.S. Senate. Crockett conceding the race this morning to the 36-year-old Tallarico, who has won more than 53% of the vote. But we don't know his general election opponent yet. NBC News is projecting that the Republican race between Senator John Kwan
and unfortunately for Jasmine Crockett, she had the final death endorsement, which was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris coming in the final hour to endorse Jasmine Crockett and putting her in the grave.
And Attorney General Ken Paxton will advance to a runoff on May 26th, with neither candidate able to get
The
to
kiss
50%
of death.
last night. President Trump, however, clearly not keen on Texas Republicans engaging in a bruising battle ahead of the general election, saying today on social media that he will be making his endorsement in the race soon and that he will be asking the candidate that I don't endorse to immediately drop out of the race. That post coming after both Republicans ripped into each other last night.
I've worked for decades to build the Republican Party, both here in Texas and nationally. I refuse to allow a flawed, self-centered, and shameless candidate like Ken Paxton risk everything we've worked so hard to build over these many years.
For too long,
Love to see
John
this
Kwan
fight-
has
this
turned his back
infighting.
on us. For too long, he attacked the border wall by calling it naive and pushed amnesty while our
real
country was being
mid-off.
invaded. For too long, he stabbed our president in the back by trying to derail his presidential campaigns and supporting the Democrats' lawfare against the president.
Steve Kornacki joins me from his home away from home, the big board. Steve, great to see you. So you and I were up late last night. Hope you got a few hours of sleep. Tell us how he did it. How did James Tallarico pull off his primary victory? And what does that tell us about Tallarico's potential chances in a general election? Reminder, folks, a Democrat hasn't won a Senate race in more than 3 decades in Texas.
Yeah, a couple things I think went into this, Kristen. First of all, you see here, I think you start right around Tallarico's political base here, which is in the Austin area, Travis County, right outside of it, too. You saw him run up monster numbers there, get monster turnout to go along with that. And I think that was part of a pattern that you saw throughout the state last night, which is the voters in particular who powered him around Austin and in some other pockets of the state, a lot of white, college-educated, sort of white-collar professional voters. We've talked about that demographic
He also did
becoming
very
more and more
well
democratic
with
nationally,
Hispanic voters,
being
which is what
highly
he needed
engaged
to
in the
do.
Trump era, extremely anti-Trump, very motivated to turn out and vote. That demographic really got behind Tallarico. It delivered big numbers from around his base in Austin, but it also allowed him to make some incursions up here. This is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. A ton of votes came out of here. You do see this was Crockett winning in Dallas County. That's the
It's also funny because basically this is now positioned as okay. So Christianity being at the center here, and you have the side of Christianity being a death cult, Let us use scripture to enforce why we should be allowed to kill people, why we should be allowed to strip rights away from human beings. And then you have the side of Christianity as informing political beliefs that are pro-human rights, that are fighting against billionaires. You have the Christian fascism versus Christian, why I'm a progressive, Jesus would have been a socialist. You've got these two sides here because James Tallarico is the son of a Baptist preacher. He talks a lot about his spirituality, uses scripture to inform his progressivism. And then Reverend Hayes, who's a reverend. And he's a guy that on October 8th delivered a very powerful speech that correctly identified Israel as an apartheid state. And he's another person who won last night and is a clear shoe-in for the general in November. He's the CEO of Rainbow / Push after Jesse Jackson. Yeah, Jesse Jackson, one of the last people that he promoted, endorsed was Reverend Hayes.
Where her district is, but right outside Dallas, north of Dallas in Collin County, Denton County, you see Tallarico was able to make pretty big incursions in Crockett's backyard, again, powered by that sort of, white suburban vote that really turned out in droves, turned out for him. And the ultimate difference maker for him, I think, was in South Texas here, heavily Hispanic areas. He beat Crockett, 2-1. He beat her by 30 points in county after county here. So all of that, I think, added up to the difference that you see right here. What kept Crockett in it was
praying that we get another Reverend winning with Ray in LA. So I actually just had a call with Ray's team yesterday, which is very funny because I had flashbacks to when I worked in politics. I was like, oh my God, I'm here again. But the reason, I'm getting involved on this campaign because this is the city that I live in. And I do believe that Ray Huang is a great candidate to go up against Karen Bass and the establishment. And I was talking to her team specifically about what my strengths are and where I think I can be of service. And I was saying that one thing to really focus on here is Ray talking about this fucking Ellison merger because Los Angeles is the home of the entertainment industry. There are a lot of people who live in this city who, with the rising cost of living, the decline in work, in production opportunities, is really a 1-2 punch. And I personally have had a lot of friends who have trickled out of the city over the last 5 years, and even more friends who work in the business who are very, very concerned constantly in regards to their careers and their future prospects. Nithya Raman is being pushed hard. I know Nithya Raman has entered the race, and I am on Nithya Raman, and I am on Ray Huang right now. So unless if Ray comes out, once she reveals her full policy agenda, then we'll have a better idea. But I am Team Ray right now. And I was like, I think one thing that we can do here that I can be a part of is, say, sitting down with California's AG, sitting down with people who work in the entertainment business and want to know that that there is a person here who is going to be fighting to not just make life more affordable in Los Angeles, but to fight for one of the biggest industries that we have in the city. And and that is entertainment. And I think with the proliferation of artificial intelligence, with these mergers that are happening, with just everything going on, a lot of people are feeling quite concerned. And I told them too, I was like, look, a lot of eyes are going to be on Los Angeles politics, as well as just the state of California. And we are a very different city from New York City. A lot of people's concerns in Los Angeles, of course, are shared by those in New York, as are shared by people across this country. But I think but that's why, like, I kept focusing on this strategy here in addressing the specific concerns in the film industry, because of how many people who live in LA work or have family that works in the industry. Finally, the Kwan Pain Force is coming in strong. Yes. And they have an event coming up that I think I'm going to try and participate in. So anyway, yeah. Why did I bring, somebody mentioned Ray. Yes. Reverend Ray Huang.
The black vote. All of the counties that you see here, just about all of the counties you see here for Crockett, significant black population there. She clearly won the black vote overwhelmingly in this primary.
Well, it's just fascinating to see that turnout. And of course, your point about Hispanics, Steve, that could very well be
Ray
a
was
big
out
determining
protesting
factor
ICE. Yeah.
once we get to the general election. Let me ask you about some of the House races, though.
Also, there are 40 people who are running for mayor right now. 40 candidates. It is a crowded race. And right now, you've got Karen Bass, who's obviously the incumbent. You've got Nithya Raman, who's got a lot of name recognition because she's a city council member, and one that I think people, if you haven't really been paying close attention, still think that she's like a progressive queen. So I could see them voting for her because they're like, oh, Nithya, yeah, wait, she's progressive, she's cool. Israel's backed Nithya. Yeah. Nithya has some really problematic positions, as well as actions that she has taken that are very much not progressive, very much not to the left. And then there's also Lindsay. Oh no, Lindsay Horvath is not running. Then there's like tech entrepreneurs and rich business people. Spencer Pratt is running. Never forget about him. So I think right now the biggest threats are Karen Bass, Nithya Raman, and Spencer Pratt. Just kidding. No, I don't think Spencer Pratt is. I don't think he's a serious threat in the race. I can see Spencer Pratt probably dropping out.
What were some of your biggest takeaways from the House races, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, scary night for incumbents in Texas and probably incumbents nationally saying, what's the atmosphere going to be like when primaries come to their state? You already have one who's gone down. Dan Crenshaw, Republican here in the Houston suburbs.
Is anybody in LA not running for mayor?
This was the only House Republican incumbent in Texas not endorsed by Donald Trump. And boy, did it show in the results. Crenshaw losing to Steve Toth. By the way, the part of this district that really did Crenshaw in is right here. This is Montgomery County. No county in America delivered a bigger plurality to Donald.
I was not paying attention to this at all, and it wasn't until I saw that Dan Crenshaw got crushed, and I went, "Oh, damn! Okay, I didn't even know he was at risk, let alone that he got crushed." I guess that's it for him for now.
Trump in 2024 than this county. So arguably the most pro-Trump big county in America sides against the one candidate not endorsed by Trump, incumbent in Texas. You go look in the 18th district here, two Democratic incumbents squaring off against each other. It is going to go to a runoff. A bit of a surprise here. A lot of folks thought that Al Green, longtime incumbent, was the underdog here against Christian Menifee, who was just elected 5 weeks ago. They are going to go to a runoff. There will be an incumbent, obviously, who will lose there. How about this one? Colin Allred, Democrat who used to be a House member, coming back, running against the Democrat who took the seat that he vacated, Julie Johnson. This is going to go to a runoff, but Allred leading preliminarily, double-digit margin over Johnson. There's an incumbent who's in big danger there in the runoff, another incumbent in big danger, Tony Gonzalez, headed towards a runoff. There's been a scandal involving Gonzalez lately. He finishes behind Brandon Herrera in the preliminary. And then you take a look over even in North Carolina here. Here's an incumbment.
So this is a really exciting thing. Nida Alam, who we've been talking about the past week, and it all started with Clay Aiken. She has faced millions of dollars in spending by AIPAC and pro AI groups, so tech companies. They have poured money into trying to make her lose. And despite that, this is an incredibly close race, and they have to obviously count, they're tallying early votes and mail-in voting. She almost has she hasn't lost yet. It's pronounced Nida. I don't think so. Last I checked. Oh wait, she did concede. Oh, that was earlier today. Sorry, my bad. I checked this morning. And then I did a bunch of stuff this afternoon, and I did not recheck. So sorry. Nida has conceded, but God, was it close. These are not the results we hoped for. I'm proud of the movement we've built, the voices we've lifted up, and the journey we have ahead. In her announcement, she noted that Fushi benefited from millions in outside spending from a variety of PACs, including one aligned with an artificial intelligence company. Does anyone else feel like we keep having these races that are historically the most expensive race, like congressional, Senate race, in this state's history, or like in history in general? And that has to do with fucking AIPAC. So many races over the last 2 years that have had historical amounts of spending, and that is due to AIPAC going hard as fuck on people who are critical of Israel. And then also AI companies that are pouring tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars into these midterms. Dark money is as big as it's ever been. According to the AI lobby just bought their first seat in Congress, but despite their millions in last-minute spending, corporate lobbies were only barely able to eke out a win because of the movement this campaign has built. Like, I think AIPAC and AI have also AI companies are pouring millions. No, not millions. Sorry, that's an overexaggerated. Well, not yet. But there was, I think it was AIPAC that just poured money into Illinois 9, which is Kat Abou-Ghazaleh's race. So I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, because that primary is on the 17th, I'm sure they're going to put even more money. According to unofficial results, Fushi led Alam by about 1,200 votes, which is less than 1% margin of victory. That's wild. If that margin held as outstanding provisional and mail ballots were counted, Alam could have requested a recount. Instead, she appears to have decided to let the results stand. This year's race was a rematch for the two women who first faced off in 2022 in what became the most expensive Democratic congressional primary in the state's history. During that race, Fushi's support for Israel and her acceptance of funding from AIPAC became a major point of contention. And she's become increasingly critical of Israel's attacks on Gaza. And this year, she pledged not to accept AIPAC funding. She's like, as soon as this race is over, I promise that I won't, that I will not accept any more AIPAC funding. Just as soon as we get our W here. The Newsom strat. In the days ahead, the incumbent has a responsibility to have this district to earn their support, Alum said. It should not take being challenged in a primary to take bold stances that voters overwhelmingly support. But I'm proud that our movement pushed our incumbent to better reflect our deeply held values and convictions. It's up to us as an entire district to demand that our representative deliver on her promises. And what I will say is I think the positive takeaway from this is one, that there was a lot of support for Nida Alum, and she was one of the only candidates who released an ad that was explicitly anti the bombing of Iran, the war, illegal war in Iran. It was a very close race. What we see happen here is that when you have candidates to the left of incumbents, that it forces them to scramble. Now, do I think that Valerie Fushi is actually about to be like a pro-Palestine baddie? No. But this forced her to answer constituents surrounding her support on AIPAC, and her saying, I am not going to take any more AIPAC money. Now that's something that she has to be and should be held to. And that's how that's how you push establishment Dems to the left. When we talk about electoral politics, is you have people in who are serious challengers, and it forces them to have to come up with responses to issues that the voters are more and more shifting away from the establishment on. So, anywho, that is a disappointing loss, obviously, but I think there's some positive takeaways here.
Valerie Fushi, two-term incumbent. She is ahead by 1,200 votes, 1% over her challenger, a Sanders-backed progressive insurgent. Scattering of votes left here. You see, we don't have.
And that is why we should not be pledging our unequivocal support to someone like Gavin Newsom 2.5 years out from the fucking presidential election. Okay. It is 2026. We don't even have the field of candidates yet. Gavin Newsom hasn't officially started running. We know that man is running, but we're 2.5 years out, and we're already seeing that Gavin, who is a political chameleon, who is reading the tea leaves, who is looking at the polls, who is looking at these races, that he's a flip-flopper. Now, does that mean that's someone who you can entrust to produce, once they're in office, their campaign pledges and promises and policies? But if Gavin is going to be the guy, then right now is the time to be pushing to the left, as we are having these takeaways from last night's primary elections and the ones that are coming up. He's not that guy. I mean, I'm just saying that as far as blue MAGA people who are like, no, it's going to be Gavin. If Gavin ends up being the one who's in the position. Okay. But before we get to that, do you not see how this is not something that we should be already signing our votes away on, when there's absolutely room here to force Gavin Newsom to take more leftist positions. And again, do I trust that dude? Fuck no. Have you, or are you going to cover who's running for California governor? You make the politics digestible and understandable, so I truly appreciate what you do. Yeah, I am. I do feel as if it's a race that I will be obviously paying attention to, maybe getting involved on, because this is the state that I live in. That's how I feel too about the mayoral election that I've already gotten involved with. Also, thank you. Have you seen the recent Cori Bush Breakfast Club interview, which talks about AIPAC? I'm hopeful about her return to politics, but still really frustrated that despite her and Jamal Bowman both being incumbents, the DNC hung them out to dry against historic millions in pro-Israel PAC spending, showing none of the deference that they're showing people like Fushi. Yeah, I saw a couple clips from that. Of course they were hung out to dry, and I think what happened with them is they were unfortunately some of the earlier races here where public sentiment has shifted, but it's shifted a lot more now than it did when they were running for re-election. They also did go up against historic levels of spending. And it doesn't always work. And that's why it's like, hey, don't be disillusioned. Don't be discouraged if there is a race that AIPAC is pouring a godsome amount of money into, because sometimes they lose, right? You look at Rashida, you look at Ilhan, you look at Summer Lee, like AOC. There are people who have not just stayed alive, but are very popular in their districts. And they are some of the most hardcore anti-Zionists in, some of them are hardcore. They are some of the loudest anti-Zionist pro-Palestine voices in Congress. So I think Cori, I think she's someone that I would love to see back in office, obviously. And I think there were some, I just think there were some things about her race and when it happened that I wonder now if it would have been different outcome. I mean, look, I'm all about Rashida and Ilhan.
Have a check mark. We haven't called it yet, but Fushi may have done just enough to survive there, but certainly not enough if you're an incumbent looking on nationally saying, how's the atmosphere? It can be tough for an incumbent right now.
Yeah, incumbents undoubtedly very jittery when they see those results. Steve, thank you so much. It was great to be up late with you watching all of the results come in last night. Great to see you as always.
Always fun to do it. Thanks, Kristen.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay up.
Okay, here is the clip that a lot of people have been passing around. Where is it? This right here. This is who is replacing Jasmine Crockett in her district.
Or we get in trouble. Well, I'm coming to get in trouble. Israel, and I'm going to quote Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter says that Israel is engaging in apartheid with Palestinians. And so the Palestinians who don't have the weaponry of Israel, the Palestinians don't have the financial backing from the United States that Israel has. And so they throw their rocks and shoot their arrows, and Israel is able to bomb them and kill them. Watch in the news the disparity between Palestinians being killed and Israelis being killed. It is totally unfair, but this country is going to stand on the side of apartheid because that's its track record. It stood by apartheid in South Africa because it created apartheid in this country.
Woo! That was October 8th, mind you. He delivered that powerful pastor sermon the day after October 7th. And he just won handily in the district that Jasmine Crockett evacuated, that she gave up in order to run for Senate. And he is pretty much a shoo-in to win in the general. So he will be the next congressman from district Reverend Hayes district. What is District 30? And his campaign didn't even focus, to my understanding, it didn't even focus that heavily on Israel and Palestine. And instead, he was like, hey, I'm going to focus on issues that are what people in this district care about: cost of living, voting rights, what Trump is doing with ICE. But he was so like staunch in his in his moral approach to Israel and Palestine from the get-go. And that's the thing. It's like there are a lot of people in this country who they care about Israel and Palestine in a way that's not just the kind of moral issue, like the morality of it, but why are we spending so much money? Why is so much of American politics at a local, state, and federal level captured by the Israeli state? I don't fucking care about Israel when it's like I can't afford my bills. I have ICE coming into my community and kidnapping my neighbors. Why the fuck do I hear my politicians going on and on and on about supporting Israel? Why are they starting another war in the Middle East? Enough is enough. And that's how, as somebody running for office, you need to get in there and talk on the things that people care about, which doesn't mean it doesn't mean throwing the Israel and Palestine issue under the bus. It means acknowledging that it's not just the clear moral position to have being supporting the liberation of an oppressed people, but redirecting things back around to say, hey, do you see how these guys do not give a fuck about the American people? They do not care that your tax dollars are being spent to bomb children in the Middle East. It's like the way that Reverend Haynes didn't spend the whole focus of his campaign on Israel, and instead emphasized issues that voters really care about. And I hope you understand what I mean by when I say care about. We just talked about the shift that has happened in the public, especially with Democratic voters, away from being sympathetic to Israel and towards being sympathetic to Palestine. But it's that you further show how American political leaders are bullshitting, are speaking out of their asses when they pretend to care about the American people, because they're too busy spending all their time and energy advocating for Israel's right to wreck the Middle East, and as they do so alongside them. My center-left lib dad tried to convince me that the Dems are just acting as if they favor Israel when they actually don't, because they have to in order to win. I think he was specifically referencing Eric Swalwell. Okay. No, there are definitely Democrats like Joe Biden who are lifelong Zionists. All right. Joe Biden loves Israel, loves Zionism. He was doing that shit for free. Like He was doing that shit when even presidents in the past had exercised their power. Like, as the president of the United States, most powerful person in the world, Joe Biden was readily handing it over to Netanyahu, to Israel. But then, yes, there are, okay, so Israel for a long time was an issue that, as a member of the American Congress, you stayed silent on, or you full-throatedly supported the state of Israel, the Zionist project. And it was so, like, somebody running for office would be advised to stay away from that topic. It's like, if you don't have anything nice to say about Israel, if you're going to be critical of Israel, don't. Like, just don't say anything if you're not going to support Israel. But that is what has been changing. And so Democrats right now, they are caught in this space where forever the safe political position has been support for Israel. You stay away from any criticism. But that's been changing. And so what we're seeing already are in these primary elections and primary and generals, that supporting Israel, it's changed from being the safe position to have, to actually being politically disastrous. Hey, I caught you live. Love seeing you with Matt Bernstein. Hey, Devil's Advocate, welcome in. He wasn't being blackmailed by Israel. He was just doing it because he's doing it for the love of the game, and the game being, I love Zionism. Joe tells a story of him and his dad and how he asked his dad about being a Zionist, and his dad said, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. And that's when the light bulb went off, and Joe was like, oh, yeah. Oh, great. Well, that's me. This is also why I subbed. You were so good on those episodes. Thank you.